but it's about older people still wanting to be competitive in racing and racing ultras.
And that will segue nicely into what went on this weekend.
Well, before I forget, I was sitting, and I'll explain why I was sitting, because you know me, if I'm in a race, I'm not sitting.
Yeah.
I don't use this kind of language, but I came up with this term because it's so fitting. Sitting is for shitting in ultras, pretty much. That's the only time you should be sitting down in my mind. But anyway, so I'm sitting, and this guy shows up for the 12-hour race, and he's 4.5 hours late. Gets there at 12:30. He's like, "Oh, Ed, I just listened to your podcast on the way here." I'm like, wow, the one that we were talking about, that race, he had just listened to that, and we're in Tennessee, or no, we're in Kentucky. And I'm like, wow, this is great, because the podcast is getting around. People are starting to listen to it. So, all right. So what happened this weekend? This weekend, I went to Kentucky, my first time in Kentucky, and it was a 24-hour race. And it was a 2-mile loop. Now, I should have done some homework on this, because to me, a 24-hour race, you're trying to get as many miles as you can in 24 hours. So I automatically think the race directors think like I do. You want a fast, flat loop. So
we have this discussion all the time. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the race I did last weekend was a 3 1/8 mile loop. It was not a flat loop. It was there was like 9,000 feet.
Yeah, we had a video. You did a little video, and we could definitely see it was treacherous.
Yeah,
with
up
mud
and down,
roots
and trip hazards. And so then here's a 2-mile loop. Well, we got out there, and they had, because of rains, they switched it to 2.2, which was an odd distance, because then I'm thinking, once I got started, I'm thinking, okay, 2.2 miles. When I get to where I'm at 100, it's going to be 99 miles. I'll have to go another loop and have 101.2 just to get 100 miles. But then I found out they decided to do like a 1 mile out. Yeah, so that was good. But because they couldn't get to where their regular loop was, they added this extra 0.1. It was up and down this hill. It's like, great, there's another hill. But the whole thing was rolling hills, as they said, on grass, and then some single track. And it's not a fast course. And
no,
I don't blame them, because they took over this race this year for the first time, and it had been going on for a while. And so they took over an existing event. But to me, it seems like if you're going to put on a 24-hour event, and you're going to get some people that might want to do 100 miles, if it's not feasible because it's not flat, then do what many of the 24-hour races do. They'll actually have 24/100.
Yes.
And they'll allow you to, like Nanigo used to be 28 hours. Now they go up to 30, but usually 30 hours.
Yeah.
And they'll sometimes have a cutoff. If you're at mile 84 or beyond, then you can continue on. Or like if it's a 30-hour cutoff, if you're at mile 80 or beyond, you can continue on to get your 100 miles in the 30 hours. And if that had been the case, it'd have been different. So I get out there, I'm doing the loop, and I'm seeing, okay, this is not a fast loop, but all right, I'll make it work. And I'm making some time because I'm fresh. So I'm doing 10.5, 11-minute miles at first and making time, and then start slowing down. And then there's this one segment, couple segments where it's slick and you slip inside a bit. And there was rain predicted for basically the whole race, but every so often a little bit of a sprinkle, and then it'd go away. But that little bit of a sprinkle was just enough to make these little mud spots really slippery. So now I'm into the race about 8 hours in. Just continuing to move as well as I can. And I start doing my math, and I'm like, okay, for me to make this happen, even with my bank time, I really need to be going at a 13-minute pace, because I got to come in, get aid, go to the bathroom, do whatever else I'm going to need to do.
Yeah.
So even though a 15-minute per mile pace is what I needed to maintain, but to maintain that, I needed to run at maybe a 13.5, 14-minute pace. And it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then I started noticing some things, like there has some not too steep of downhills, but a little bit of downhills. I started feeling a little bit of quad soreness, but then a little bit of a strain on my left quad. It's like, oh, that's not good. And so there's that. And then I knew the rains were going to come in, and that those money sections were going to get super slick. And easily, when that happens, you can go from a 14-minute per mile to a 20 plus minute per mile, just slipping and sliding,
Oh yeah.
On the mud. And then I noticed something else, and that why this didn't dawn on me initially, I don't know. But so my kidney was sore. It's like, man, I don't have kidney issues. I mean, all the times I've done bad water, all the races I've done heat. I know there's some runners who they'll have blood in their pee. I've never had that happen. I never had any issues with my kidneys.
I never have either.
Plenty well. But it's like, why is my kidney hurting here a little bit? And then I started putting two and two together. I hadn't slept. Okay, so the 2 nights before, I drove from home to Las Vegas because I looked for the cheapest flight. Even though it's a 4-hour drive from home to Vegas, the flight was really cheap to go from there over to Cincinnati. So then I ended up driving, kind of, stopping here and there at rest stops to sleep, but not getting good sleep Thursday night. And then my flight was supposed to come into Cincinnati at midnight Friday night. Well, I get this email from the airline, and it wasn't asking me. It said, your flight has been rescheduled. You will arrive in Cincinnati at 5:06 a.m. It wasn't, hey, we'd like to do this. Are you okay with this? Or, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to give you a $50 voucher for your next flight. Yeah. It's like, accept this or lose your flight. It was no. And
well, that's how they always are. Yeah, they got you over a barrel.
And going from Denver, our flight was now scheduled to leave at midnight, going to Cincinnati, losing 2 hours, and then a 2.5-hour flight. So it's like, all right, I can at least sleep on the plane, get a little bit of sleep, because I didn't get much sleep the night before. I need to get some sleep. And then I'm sitting next to this woman who has a 2-month-old baby. It's not what you're thinking. The baby was perfectly quiet the whole time. But I have a 2.5. Her baby was 2.5 months old, but I have a new 2-month-old granddaughter. So it struck up a little conversation. That was that. She was a talker. I was a talker. Yeah. We were like talking almost the whole time. There goes my sleep time. Oh yeah. And finally, I told her what I was going there for. I said, I got to get a little bit of sleep. So I got some sleep, and then got to the airport, and then needed to get, I decided to go with a Lyft instead of getting a rental car. It was just cheaper because I knew I can get a ride back after the race. And so I figured I can sleep in the car. Yeah. So I did. I got about an hour's sleep. Anyway, so 2 nights in a row, I'm not getting much sleep. And as you know, I had severe adrenal fatigue, and for about 6 months, I took off from running. And guess where the adrenal gland is? Yeah. It's right on top of the kidney. And because of, and then I had some stress that was going on back home, and lots of stuff going on. It's like, I'm taxing my body. I'm going right back to the pattern that I'd done that got me in the first place. So I added all that up. Long story short, or long story long, I decided, you know what, I'm going to call it at 12 hours. I'm not going to go, and the rain's going to come, and with very little sleep, I'm going to get so tired and beat myself up, and I don't want to get to 98 miles and not make 100. What's the point of that? So that was my decision, and so I stopped at 12 hours. I'm fresh. My legs are fresh. I'm coming into my next race. I know I'm going to be fully recovered. I'll get good sleep. Yeah. So I finally started doing some things like using logic instead of beating my body into the ground, week after week after week. I can't do that anymore if I want to sustain being able to perform well. And I've got a couple of week races in a row. The good news, the race next week is a 30-hour race. Yeah. So I've got plenty of time. Plus, it's a 1 mile flat paved loop. That's my race. Yeah. Other than that, it's in Georgia. It's going to be hot and humid, but still, I've got 30 hours. And then the weekend after that is in Oregon, and that's also a 1 mile flat paved loop now in Oregon with good weather. So I've got 2 good races coming up that I should be able to perform well going into those without being all beat up.
Yeah, and that goes to, it's kind of like funny that you kind of did what I was going to ask anyways, but you just spilled the beans without me having to drag them out of it, which is good. You kind of like, no, I mean, he's just, and I often with the athletes I coach, I'm like, I want to make it to the point where you don't even really need me more than just occasional guidance, that you kind of learn your body and learn the signs and quit ignoring those signs and issues. And so, like you're talking about the pacing and stuff, to do 200 miles in 24 hours, you have to do 14:24 pace, 4.2 miles an hour. And it's funny, I was talking to Blanc about this morning when we were walking. I was like, civilians think they can walk 4 miles an hour. And no, they can't. They can walk 4 miles an hour for maybe 30 minutes, but even in an hour, 4.2 miles an hour is fast. Blanc has been walking for 3 years now straight, and we go out and we're doing 3.3, 3.4 miles an hour. And if anybody saw us, they'd be like, those two are moving pretty quickly. And so your margin of error in a 100-mile race, in a 24-hour race to get 100 miles is very, very slim. As you don't know as well, because you used to be able to crank them in 20 hours. And so when you told me, that you stopped at 50, I was like, well, that's good, because you're not going to probably get to 100, or you're going to have to bury yourself. And then I started thinking about your quest of, possibly trying to take the 100-mile record, that I kind of looked and counted Walter's just straight